No leaning back. Not in this class.
Okay. In the book, Jake, you talk about when you first moved back to Minneapolis, and you have the job, I think downtown someplace there. You're making copies, and it's an office job, and
Right.
things like that. Is it amazing to you to think how your life has transformed from that point to when Semisonic really took off and where you're at now?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, because music success can be so elusive, or it's not always there. I sometimes wonder if I almost don't want to jinx myself by saying, "Yeah, I came a long way," because like, what if I end up, like knocking on the door of another office temp place, I mean, I honestly don't think I will, but so part of me is even like a little frightened to think of the distance. But actually, I'm still pretty good friends with a lot of the people I worked with at that temp job. So it all happened. I mean, there were so many changes over such a short amount of time. It's almost kind of blurry. I think also one thing is that Minneapolis is the kind of town where everybody knows each other, so you never really ever feel like a big star, because you're still Jake, the same guy everybody knows, It's like, okay, well now Jake plays in a successful band, but he's still Jake. I mean, I didn't feel like I became a different person. I think that happens to some people when they get famous. I think they feel like they can finally be the person they always wanted to be. Whereas I guess I didn't really feel that way.
I remember you talking about too the joy when you're able to quit your day job
Yes.
and do this full time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, is there ever like any sort of trepidation? I mean, at having music as a career, like the last night at the clinic, the mother asking on behalf of her child, this is what he wants to do as a career move, and your response was, well, this isn't maybe a great investment type thing. I mean, it's like,
in other words, there's a lot of risk involved.
Of course, nothing secure about a job in a rock band, at least initially.
So, I was pretty scared about, especially as time went on. I mean, when I first got into music, I was like, well, it's definitely going to happen. I mean, I'm me. I mean, it's got to happen. Mm-hmm. And then, like, it goes on and it's not happening. You're like, well, it's going to happen. And, you're kind of wondering more and more. And I think by the time, I was like 31 years old by the time Semisonic got together, and I had like pretty much nothing happening in music career-wise. Actually, I would say when you talked about the difference between working at a day job and afterwards, I think there's one important difference, which is when you're supporting yourself as an artist from other work. In other words, you go to a party and someone says, "What do you do?" And you say, "I'm a musician." "Oh yeah, what band?" "Well, I don't really have a band." "Well, you make records?" "Well, I make demos in my basement." And so you don't make any money off it? "No, I work as a temp job, and I would feel really kind of ashamed of that. I don't think I had to feel that way, and I don't think it was good to feel that way. It was just kind of a natural response. Like, I'm not a real musician if I'm not making my living from it. So then when we got our publishing advance and I was able to quit my job, I felt so validated. Like now I could look at my parents' friends in the eye, and not feel like I was sort of like bringing down the family average.
Semisonic, even though you're not actively out playing at the moment, it's afforded you opportunities to do other things and to indulge yourself in other artistic areas, obviously, as well. So, I've always been curious, what happens with like the support crew and people like
those guys, like the road crew, like Toby and Brad and all those.
Dave Ness.
Dave Ness, right?
The sound guy.
Dave Ness
Brad.
So Brad is the guy who would do our sound. He'd be the mixer. And Toby was the guy who did setting up the stage and would run out with guitars if someone's guitar strings broke. And then Dave was the guy who was sort of our business manager, who made sure that all our tax forms were getting filed and that we were paying our bills and that people who owed us money for playing the checks were coming in and all that kind of stuff. So then when the band shuts down, what do those guys do? So Toby works for his dad's company who makes jet engines. It's amazing, like the people who do who are carrying the guitars out to the guitar players are generally super overqualified. I mean, it looks like, God, all that guy does is tune guitars and take them out on stage, but they have to be like really overqualified because the skill, the show depends on them. They have to be able to like string a guitar up, and if something's wrong with the fretboard, they have to be able to figure that out immediately and look at it, or if the electronics aren't working. I mean, they generally all know electronics, all that stuff. So Toby got a job making jet engines. Brad, our sound mixer, has gone on and produced other bands and mixing other bands. Dave also sort of farms himself out to as a business manager to other people. So they've all been able to find other things to do.
Are people like that in sort of on call? Like if Semisonic decides to go back out on the road, are they ready to rejoin in most cases, or
they're on call? But I mean, if they have a better paying opportunity, then like, does anybody know the band NERD? Does that ring a bell? Kind of a hip hop band. Well, Brad mixed them for a while, and he was making a lot more money than he would have with Semisonic. So I mean, if Semisonic needed him, it would have been only his sense of loyalty that might have prevailed upon him to come out with us instead of, you got to make money in life. You got to make a living, and he's married and has a daughter. So it would be kind of, if he's available, I'm sure he'd love to do it, but got to put bread on the table.
Right. Lots of people in young bands and whatnot, the goal early on is always to get signed.
Right.
And to sign with a record label,
right,
or something. Do you feel like today that's sort of overhyped, that it's that important to get signed?
I think it depends on what kind of band you're in. If you're in you have to, one thing that's really important when you're looking for a record contract as a band is you have to really be honest with yourself about what kind of appeal you have. Like, are you like kind of a garage band? Are you like a band for like people who like super hardcore kind of trashy sounding music? In which case you're probably not going to be playing in front of stadiums full of people. Do you play really sort of, radio ready, kind of instantly accessible pop? What do you make? So before you sign a deal, you have to have a kind of a sense of that, and then that sense will sort of naturally lead you towards like labels. Like when Semisonic was looking for a record deal, everybody knows Nirvana, right? Well, that's when Nirvana had just come out, and Nirvana's music is really loud and dark and angry, as opposed to Semisonic, who are kind of wussy, kind of pop. Like Nirvana could beat up Semisonic any day, just in terms of the volume and emotion of the music. So we had a hard time finding a record label because of the fact that all the record labels wanted to do was to find another Nirvana, and Semisonic certainly was not like that. I mean, other bands that came along later, like Limp Bizkit and Korn and Linkin Park, I mean, they have that sort of like super aggressive sound about them. But we were kind of going against the grain. So we had to be careful when we were looking for a record deal to find a record label where they weren't going to expect us to be the next Nirvana. They recognized that we were something else.
Right.
So knowing what kind of music you have and being honest with yourself about that is sort of an important part of that process.
What is it exactly, and Dan and I have talked about this before, Mr. K. What is it exactly that a label does? What's its primary function for a band? Is it mostly distribution, or just the apparatus of going out on the road?
It depends on the label. Different labels have different strengths.
Okay.
Some labels have a lot of money, and they'll just pay you a lot of. They'll be willing to spend money to get you into nicer studios with better producers and make nicer, more expensive videos. Some labels have, like, sometimes you will sign with a label because there's a particular, the A&R person is the scout. A&R stands for artists and repertoire. So the A&R people are the people who go out to bars and look at bands and say, well, that's a good band, I want to sign them, or I don't like them, or whatever. And so you have to find a good A&R person, because then they're going to sort of like say, okay, I like your music. Here's the people I think who it's going to appeal to, and how do we get the music to them, and who should produce your record, and who should mix your record, and what songs should we record, all that kind of stuff. So you might choose a record label because you really like your A&R person. You might choose a record label because they are really successful in getting the songs on the radio. So there's all kinds of considerations, and another reason you might choose a particular label is that the person who's interested in signing you has a lot of power at that label. Like, there are some people who work at record companies, and then no one else at the record company really cares what they think or listens to them, which is a drag. And unfortunately, you don't want to be signed by that person, because then you're sort of marked when you come through the door. It's like, oh, that's another one of Bob's bands, yeah, we're really going to work hard for them, So
You feel like it's possible for a young band, for example, that has their own label?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a perfectly viable way to go
Totally.
about it?
I mean, you just have to have your expectations. Well, some bands are figuring out with the internet.
Right.
I mean, the internet's this weird world where, like, there's a zillion bands, so it's hard to be a band on the internet because you're like just competing with a million other bands.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, there's no record company in between you and the whole world. So if by some weird, how these weird things happen on the internet, right? I mean, suddenly everybody's going to one website to watch one little film, right? You know how that happens? Like these weird, like, crazy things crop up. And well, if you're a band who can like figure out how to be one of those crazy things and crop up, then it could be hugely great for you.
What about a band? Is it possible for a band to be successful, in your opinion, at the same time as being more or less indifferent to radio? Or is radio
Sure.
part of them?
Well, it just depends on how you're going to define success. I mean, there's a band called Wilco, which Mr. K went to see on Saturday. He went to see one of the singer-songwriter of the band on Saturday night in Lincoln. They have a pretty big following, but they really don't get played on the radio.
That's true.
I don't know if you guys know the band REM. Is that vaguely familiar maybe to some of you? I'm trying to think of another band that, well, there are plenty of examples of bands who didn't get on the radio at first, but they had success, and their fan base kept them going. They just went around playing shows, and their fans knew about them, and their fans bought their records. Oh, Fish.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Fish. They have, like, their concerts are like these crazy, like, weekend-long affairs where it's like a big love fest. Everybody comes and buys organic food from, the organic food seller setting up. They set up like a huge campground and have like a big concert. So, and they don't get played on the radio at all. So it just takes more work, because obviously when you get on the radio, you've got like a million people listening to you right away. Whereas when you play at a show, you've got maybe a few hundred people there. So it's quicker to get to lots of people on the radio. But there's an old saying that if you make fans by the handful, you only lose them by the handful. If you make them by the bucketful, then you lose them by the bucketful. And we've all seen that, right? I mean, like these sort of like meteoric, these people who like show up, have a huge hit record, and then they disappear from sight, right? Whereas and people don't feel as attached to them as people they do who have taken a long time to sort of build up to their success. Then people feel a little bit more loyal to them.
One other sort of industry question.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the usefulness of a record label. A producer, when you're going to make a record, what is exactly the function of a producer? And also, why is a producer needed? Because when I think of Semisonic, for example,
mm-hmm.
you and John and Dan, are about as pop savvy as it
mm-hmm.
goes, well educated about music. You know the sound that you're reaching for,
right.
What Semisonic is about. Why do you need a producer? Why do you turn it over to somebody else in that?
Well, so what a producer does for a record, you often see produced by so-and-so. The producer is sort of in charge of making the record good, making a great record. He's like what a film director would be for a film. So they're the sort of artistic overseer of the project. So they, for instance, are going to, of course, each of them have different emphases to their particular production style. But they're going to be deciding, like, well, we need to use these kind of mics on these drums to make them sound this way. And I want to use this song, and I want it arranged this way, and I want to use that performance of it. I don't want you guys recut it, and it sounds better than the first time you did it. So we're going to use that second time. And in fact, we're going to use the second verse and third verse of take 2 with the intro and first verse of take 1, and we'll splice them together and make that. Okay. So, and then we'll put strings on it or whatever. That's a producer's job. Now, but another thing that a producer does that's really vital, and this is why a band, even if you're a band who knows how to do all that engineering stuff and you know how to do all that arranging stuff, the reason it might be good to have a producer is that here's what's really hard when you're making a record. You're singing or you're playing, and then you've got to decide if it's any good. And sometimes it's really hard, like if your lead singer is in the vocal booth and they're singing, and you stop the tape and you go, okay, do it again. And they say, why? And you're like, yeah, it just didn't do it for me. And they go, well, what didn't do it for you? Well, I don't know, dude. Just try it again. I don't know. It's something, it just didn't sort of grab me. Well, what didn't grab you? I've been in here for half an hour singing. What's the problem? Well, you can see how that situation is going to get kind of ugly, right? And you really don't want to be like your bandmate. You really don't want to have the bandmate being in the position of the bad guy. That's what you have to be as the producer sometimes. Is like, I know you're working really hard, but we still don't have it. We got to keep going. He's like the coach. So it's good to have somebody outside of the band who can kind of come in and be the hired bad guy. Yeah. And then the band can all kind of get along and say, oh, that rotten, producer guy is pushing us so hard. Sometimes I could just punch him. It's a way to sort of like help maintain the band chemistry a little bit.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier you feel like you're the same person, have the same friends in Minneapolis as by and large as you did before Semisonic made its step. Have you encountered friends or colleagues that resented the commercial success of Semisonic at all, or
no? Not
particularly.
I mean, just thankfully, I just don't tend to hang. I know people like that, and I'm just too scared of them to even hang out with them to begin with, because they are. I mean, I'm sure all you guys know people who are like, so and so only likes me because now I'm popular, or now I did this good thing, so and so's talking to me. I made the big shot at the game, and now they're talking to me. But now, 5 days from now, they won't talk to me. And those people are very aware of like success and failure, and that's like people who are always sort of like measuring you by your success or lack of success. It really kind of, I have a really uncomfortable feeling inside of me whenever I'm around those people. So I tend to still like to have my friends who are going to love me no matter what, short of like, burning down an orphanage. They're gonna, they're gonna be with me and be my friends, and no matter what my failures are in life. So I mean, I personally need that kind of security to be able to sort of just, live life. It's much easier when your friends are going to be there for you. So I just kind of avoid all the people who would be like resentful based on your success, or glad because of your failure, because it makes them feel more secure in whatever twisted way.
Right. Last night in Lincoln, Jake did a drum clinic, and one of the questions that came up afterwards that really struck me, and your response to it was, somebody asked, we listened to recordings of a number of different famous drummers, and somebody asked afterwards, do you feel that one of the things that all these drummers have in common is that they all just have natural talent, and it's just, it was innate within them that they could be so good? And you said that may be true, but they practiced a lot.
Right.
And is that the case 9 times out of 10, or every time? I mean, do you guys have you and Dan and John, particularly early on, were you spending hours and hours a day building up your chops?
Oh, you have to. I mean, you have to practice a lot to be able to play at the top level of your ability. And I mean, I think one thing that one aspect of having natural talent is the ability to be a good critic of yourself. That's an important skill to have, to like say, okay, well, I'm good at that, I don't need to practice that, what I need to practice is this, you know? And it's not as much fun to practice the thing you're no good at.
Right.
It's just like when you're working out in the gym, you know, like you may be good at one thing and really suck at another thing. Well, the talented athlete is the athlete who's going to recognize, like Michael Jordan, when he came into the NBA, the rap on him was, well, he's a great scorer, but he can't play defense. So he really committed himself. He knew that about himself, and he said, I want to be the best defender. Mm-hmm. You know, so he really worked his butt off to become like an amazing defensive basketball player. And by the time he retired, you know, he was like one of the all-time greatest defensive players in the game. Right. So I think that's a big part of like talent, is like just recognizing your weaknesses and being able to motivate yourself to work on those weaknesses.
Right.
And then also, it's important to know what you're good at too, because it's, you know, in life, you know, it's good to have like the point on your wedge to get, you know, like when a snowplow goes down the road and it's got, you know, those snowplows that are sort of V-shaped, it kind of clears the way. Well, the thing that you're good at, like in my case on the drums, the thing that I'm good at is not making a lot of fancy moves. It's like playing a drum beat that feels good to play with. And so I sort of direct myself musically based on that, and then work on all the other stuff to sort of like bring that along too. But it's good to know what your best foot to put forward is.
Right. Yeah. People throw that phrase around a lot, natural talent, and they think that means the person doesn't have to work, but they don't realize you're getting to the gym at 5 a.m. or whatever. I
mean, the most talented people you think of, like Michael Jordan is probably way more talented than most of the other basketball players, but he was probably also the hardest working. Mm-hmm. Unlike Prince, you guys have heard of Prince? Well, that guy is just like sick talented. I mean, he can play all the instruments better than anybody we know. I mean, he's like just a genius on guitar. He can sit down and he's probably a better drummer than me. He's an amazing piano player. He's a dancer. He's a singer. He's got it all. But he's also like he's a crazy workaholic. I mean, and that's why he's got all that skill. Sheryl Crow, she's got a master's degree in classical piano. I mean, she is like super talented, you know, and she's like really hardworking, and she just works. So I mean, where does the sort of what you're born with and how much work you put in start? I don't know. It's different with everybody, but it is interesting to me that the people who I think have the most natural talent are also just like the hardest working. You know, they really push themselves. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because they're really excited by their talent and they want to take it even further. I don't know.
Different sort of question, general question. What's it like to come out here to Pawnee City High School?
It's cool.
In the middle of small town in the middle of the country. Is it sort of surreal in some ways, or kind of bizarre?
No, because I grew up in Illinois, in Champaign, Illinois, which is like half the size of Lincoln, and then there were lots of small towns around Champaign, like Mahomet and Monticello and Whiteheath and whatever, that are about the size of Pawnee. So I mean, I'm familiar with, and you know, obviously, I mean, you guys pretty much listen to the same music that you would listen to if you lived in a bigger city. I mean, the internet now, especially, you know, it's not like you guys are walking to school carrying your lunch in a pail and like wearing wooden shoes and, you know, like taking your notes on a little chalkboard like on Little House on the Prairie. I mean, you're sitting at the same desk and wearing the same clothes and listening to the same music that you would if you lived like in New York, pretty much, you know. So it's not that big of a culture shock. What is nice for me is I live in New York now, and New York is so crowded. I mean, it's like, between 8 and 12 million people, you know, in this really small area. And like sometimes you just like, when I go to the movies in New York, and I, you know, like Suzanne, my girlfriend, and I, you know, we go to a movie on a Friday night where you walk down the street and you got people coming at you and you're sort of like doing that, and then you get on the subway and you find a seat and you ride into town, you come up out of the subway stairs and you get to the theater and you stand in line, you get your ticket and you get your seat and you sit down and you're protecting yourself, and the movie comes on, and then you have to do the whole thing in reverse, and you get back home and you close your eye and you're like, oh man, you know, how do we do it? No wonder we hardly ever go to the movies. I mean, it's just, you know, it's a lot. And New York has a lot of cool opportunities about it, but one thing that's really nice coming to Pawnee is like space. You know, I mean, literally, I mean,
The drive down.
The drive down is like, there's, you know, it's just like we didn't, I don't think we saw, if we saw 10 cars.
Yeah, probably not.
You know, and it was just like nice, you know, you can exhale. And like I grew up, you know, where you can see, you know, it's pretty flat where I grew up, even flatter than here. You can see for miles all around in every direction. So I'm sort of programmed probably in a similar way to what you guys are. Like I need a lot of like space around me to feel like I'm sane. You know what I mean? You get too crowded in and it's like, whereas New Yorkers, when they come out to, you know, the country, they're like, you know, no hospital, you know, no Barnes and Noble. What happens if I have a heart attack? What happens if I have a book attack? You know, or if I need a cappuccino, where am I going to go? You know, or what happens if a raccoon comes after me? Can those things kill you? You know, so I think I'm probably, because of where I grew up, much more sort of like this seems pretty normal to me.
Alternately, though, you live in New York,
Yeah.
and you must thrive on
I
sort
do.
of the energy
It's a
there.
lot of energy.
Yeah.
I mean, you feel it. I mean, actually, one thing that's interesting, and you should all visit New York at some point if you have the chance. It's an amazing place. And you know, you walk down Broadway, it is amazing. I mean, you can't help but gawk. I mean, you feel really stupid. You're like, I don't want to look like a tourist, but man, this is amazing. You know. And like I remember in college, I went to college in Boston, and I would drive down to New York, and about 100 miles away from New York, you start feeling it, and it's really weird. Like suddenly the radio stations are just a little bit more, and you're like, oh man, you know, we're coming into the city, you know, and like you get in there and like you see these high-rise buildings all around you, know, like there's just people, and there's this, I swear there's just some kind of like energy level from all the people there. There's just like a force field you get from like massing that many people together. So you do, and it is cool. I mean, it gives you lots of ideas, and like you can see like weird like performances from all around the world that I mean, one advantage of New York is you get to see the things that don't make it out to the rest of the country. So you get to see weird theater productions that maybe get put on in New York and then they move on to London or Paris or whatever. So, or if you want to get a weird book or a weird record, or if you have some favorite artist, I mean, they're probably all going to perform in New York, or the book is probably going to be in New York. Whereas you can't always say that,
Right.
depending on where you live. So it is great to be that close to all the things that are interesting.
When Semisonic gets ready to do another record and hopefully
Uh-huh.
tour again, what will be the logistics at that point? Will you need to
I'll have
move
to go
back
to-
to Minneapolis?
Yeah,
or-
because Dan and John both live in Minneapolis, and they both have kids, and you know, sort of 2 versus 1, you know. And we all, you know, and Minneapolis is where we've made most of our records, and so what we'll probably do, because Suzanne, my girlfriend, isn't going to be too crazy about me just disappearing for 3 months. We'll probably do it like in 2-week chunks. Fly back, work for 2 weeks, then take a break. And that's kind of good too, because you kind of need to get a little perspective. You know, you kind of like, you need to record some, and that's how you make a record. You record some, and then you take it back and you listen to it, and you go, you know, I really like that 3rd song a lot, you know, but that 2nd song, the more I listen to it, the more it bugs me. Let's not do that one, you know. And so you need that little sense of distance, because when the record comes out, then you can't change it, you know. So you want to do all of that processing and thinking about how you feel about all the music as you're doing it. So it's not a bad thing to kind of move a little slowly.
Are you recognized frequently in New York or in Minneapolis?
I've been recognized like 3 times in New York, all by people from Minneapolis. So, because I'm the drummer in the band. Like literally when closing time was a hit, I was walking around a museum with Dan in New York City, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and these 3 breathless 15-year-old girls from high school came up to us and said, "Are you the singer for Semisonic?" And I'm standing right next to Dan, and he goes, "Yes, I am." I felt like standing further behind him and saying, "Now do you recognize me?" Yeah. But so I would, as the drummer, you just don't really get recognized that much unless you're like in a super famous band like U2 or the Police or something. So
it must be different in Minneapolis, though.
It is, but then again in Minneapolis, since everybody knows each other, if someone says, "Hey, Jake," I mean, you don't know if that's someone you know or not. You lived there for 10 years, so I mean, I met a lot of people. You don't know if it's, like one time I had a kind of an embarrassing thing, like this guy was honking his horn, he was in traffic, and I walked out into the traffic jam, he's going, "Hey, Jake," and I walked out there, I said, "Hey, man, how have you been?" Like, I was thinking to myself, I don't know who the hell this is, but I don't want to look like a jerk rock star guy, I better like ask him how he's been. He goes, "No, I don't know you, I'm just a fan." And I went back to, but then another time, like, I came back to Minneapolis from Europe, and I wrote about this in the book. And we had this really successful tour in Europe, and I came back and I saw these 2 guys, sort of high school age guys, going. And they came up to me with a camera, and I've been having my picture taken all over Europe, and they go, "Would you mind?" And I go, "Sure," and I kind of straightened my collar and fixed my hair. And they handed me the camera and posed together. They just wanted me to take a picture of them, But I thought, I'm Mr. Big Shot being recognized at the airport. So that's the kind of world where I am, Not really a celebrity, but maybe a few people who are Semisonic fans recognize me.
We talked in the last class about life on the road and the tour bus and all that thing. Is it, you hear musicians talk a lot about how grueling it is to be on the road, and somehow that doesn't always register. Like you're on a luxurious tour bus, but you're on the road on a tight schedule. Is it as grueling as people?
Well, grueling is not the right word, I don't think. Grueling is like bussing tables or working in a coal mine. I think you really got to keep it in perspective. I mean, you just cannot complain about any life where at the end of your workday, a room full of people are standing up and applauding. Just not that many people get that in life. So I always felt pretty lucky. The exhausting part of it, though, I think exhausting is a good word. Because, I don't know if you've ever gone on vacation, and we're going here, and we're taking our suitcases and we're going there, and after a while you're all kind of tired. It's just like traveling around and not having your own bed to sleep in. Somehow you always sleep better in your own bed. So you get a fuller night's sleep at home. You have all your clothes and all your stuff. Just the psychic exhaustion of not knowing where you're going to eat dinner, where you're going to. Sorry, no, that's cool. The psychic exhaustion of just like all the uncertainty that you may have experienced on vacation. We'll just multiply that out by 6 weeks. So imagine a vacation where you're doing a different city every day. Like your parents are saying, "Come on, kids, today we're going to Chicago." And you're like, "Oh man, no, it's great. We'll see the World Trade Tower and the Sears Roebuck building. And tomorrow we're going to St. Louis. We're going to see the Arch." And you're like, "Dad, slow down. I just want to stay in one city and just kind of veg and watch TV, So that's the kind of exhausting part of it. But then you do have this amazing thing at the end of every day. You have a rock show, which I don't know if you guys have been to, many concerts, but they're just like super exciting and really fun. And it's especially fun when you're the person on stage, it's just like you're riding this huge wave of energy,
10,000 people in Mexico
Well,
City.
even 10,000 people in Mexico City or 100 people at the 400 bar in Minneapolis. If they're like into your band, it's super, super fun. Yeah.
How many days or months in a row have you been on the road before?
I think the longest we ever did was 6 weeks because Dan, is married and has a baby, and John is now married. So I think like family considerations kept us off the road from any long stretches at one time. But like we would have several years where we spent 200 days of the year on the road. You know, so that's a lot of traveling. I mean, that's 2 out of 3 days almost here on the road. What's really exhausting, actually, you know, if you have like a month-long tour, you kind of get into it. After a while, like the first 2 weeks are kind of rough, but then the second 2 or 3 weeks after that, you kind of have your rhythm established. What's really hard is to do 5 days out, come back for 5 days, go 5 days out again, then come back, because you never really get back into your home routine or into your road routine. You're kind of like stuck shifting gears, and that's almost like just as exhausting.
Mr. K mentioned something about the press being here.
Oh, okay.
Maybe he's going to come in. You guys have questions? Maybe it's a good time for. Yeah.
No questions?
We have questions for you later on in our English class.
Oh, okay, you don't want to spend those questions now. Not have the precious, yeah.
Do you feel like there's a Semisonic being based out of Minneapolis, for example? Is there a comparative disadvantage to a Midwest band like that as opposed to being from
No, I
one of
think
the
it's
big
really,
metropolis?
no, I think it's really good. Well, one thing, being in the Midwest, it just sets the threshold higher. You got to be a little bit better to get the people to come out, fly on an airplane to see you. Whereas if you're a band from LA or New York, they just get in a car and drive over from the record company office and see you. But on the other hand, it kind of works to your advantage because they feel it's a little more special. Like if you're a great band that just is down the block from the record company, their tendency will be to think, yeah, but they're right here. I mean, how special can it be if I can just see them anytime?
There's no urgency.
Yeah, whereas, I mean, you know that thing about being unattainable and hard to get, you know. Just as it works in sort of like relationships, you know, it also works with being a band. If you're a band from kind of like a weird, faraway place, which is how Minneapolis is viewed by people who live in New York and in LA, well then you've got that advantage of like kind of being from this other world that they're kind of curious about.
One of the things that I've always thought about, that among other things that sets you apart as a drummer, is that you play keyboards at the same time
Right.
on many songs.
Right.
And I was always curious, is that sort of a function of an effort by a 3-piece band to sound
Right.
even bigger? I mean, you guys
Yeah.
never had any problem sounding huge, but even adding
Right,
that
it was.
much
We
more.
wanted to sound bigger. So what I would do is I would have a keyboard over here, and I'd be playing with my sticks, and then I would hold my stick like that and play the keyboard as I would play the drums with the other 3 limbs. And one advantage of that, there's 2 advantages. One is that, of course, it fills up the sound and gives you like a little bit more, as Dan was suggesting. Now, in addition to being just bass, drums, and guitar, now you have like a keyboard part too, right? So it's one more part. But the other advantage is that one thing we really hated were like really busy keyboard parts, where the keyboard player's putting all 10 fingers down at the keys at the same time. Well, if it's the drummer playing the keyboard part, then that just limits it automatically to being something pretty simple and easy, right? I mean, how hard can it be if the drummer has to play drums and play the keyboards at the same time? That's kind of like a built-in insurance policy against, you know, overplaying keyboardists.
And maybe at the same time, it just occurs to me that it might lend itself to what you were talking about earlier with the drums, that you're not, you know, every rest in a song, you're not filling it up with a bunch of fills. You're doing more the basic vibe and the feel of it.
I think that's a really important thing in a band, you know. And I don't know, do any of you guys play, like, are any of you guys interested in playing in bands at all, or like play guitar, or maybe? Some do, and don't want to say. That's cool. Well, if you ever do find yourself in a situation like that, or maybe acting on stage is another good analogy. You don't want to you want to leave some space for everybody else. It's the same like, suppose you're hanging out with friends, right? And you may have a friend who's like got a really big personality, and what they do with that big personality is, usually if we're just hanging out and we're friends, well, you're there and I'm here, and then there's this neutral space in between us, right? But with With some people, they see that neutral space and say, well, if you're not using it, I'll take it out. I'll just be even louder and more domineering or whatever. These people already know who I'm talking about. They know who it is. But anyway, there are musicians like that too.
Oh.
You know, there are musicians or drummers who like, well, no one's doing anything in that little rest, so I'll fill it up with this. Well, there's another place to make more noise, you know, and no. You know, you have to leave space there for the listener to feel invited in and sort of be there too with the band. And it's also important to leave that space there so that the other musicians in the band can like have space to think and space to feel and space to react to what's happening around them. Or if you're on stage and you just keep like gesturing too big and sort of taking all the attention away from the other people on stage, well, you're kind of like sinking the ship because you're undermining the collaborative nature of it all. So friendships are collaborations, just like being in a band or just like being on stage. So it is a good sort of like valuable thing to think about, like leaving that sort of neutral territory there so that everybody can have their own little space and then there's this nice buffer.
We talked earlier about what happens when you bring a song to the group. But I was curious about the vocal arrangements in the group. For example, how to work out the different harmonies and whatnot. Is it always a known quantity in Semisonic? You've got it the pattern down that Dan gets the high part, you get the middle part, John gets the low part, or is that something you work out?
Unfortunately, because Dan and John are the two best singers, they get whatever first two parts they want to sing, and then whatever's left over, if they want it there, then I sing it. And that usually means like the high part or the low part or whatever. Like I'm really like the worst singer in the band is being pushed the hardest, which seems kind of backwards. But well, one thing is that we now have less harmony in we do a lot less sort of vocal harmony than we used to. I think our songs have become more our arrangement techniques have become more streamlined. We don't want to have a lot of guys just sort of singing along all at once. And oftentimes on our records, especially our later records, if there were any harmonies, it might be Dan harmonizing with himself. And the reason for that is it sounds more intimate. As a listener, if it's the same singer harmonizing with himself or herself, it still just kind of feels like one person. So that if the song has like a really intimate lyrical content, and you want to maintain that intimacy, you can't have a big gang of guys cheering in with, you know, background vocals and kind of crowding the room a little bit. You know, you just need to keep it between the singer and the listener. So that's why as time went on, I think we kind of clued in on that, and more of the harmony was just like maybe one harmony line that Dan would sing. And then if we ever had cause for like oohs and ahs, which it sounds really stupid, but I swear if you ever get in a band, you're just going to be finding yourself singing ooh and ah a lot. It's fun to say ooh and ah for some reason. It is. It's just makes a cool sound in your mouth, a good feeling. So, and anybody who's ever like sang in the shower knows what I'm talking about. Or when you get your driver's license and roll up the windows and singing along with the music on the radio. So if there's ever any oohing and ahhing, then definitely John and Jake kind of contribute for that. Yeah.
In the band prior to Semisonic, Trip Shakespeare, John did a lot more of the lead vocals.
Right.
And that's particularly by the last album, it seemed like he was doing at least a third of the lead vocals. And in Semisonic, it's much more
Dan.
Yeah. That was a conscious decision, is that?
Well, it wasn't, so Trip Shakespeare was this band that came before Semisonic. Semisonic is 3 people. It's me on drums, Dan on guitar, and John on bass. And Dan and John used to be in another band called Trip Shakespeare. It was Dan on guitar, John on bass, Dan's brother Matt on guitar, and then the drummer was a woman named Elaine Harris. So in Trip Shakespeare, they had 3 lead singers, and each of them would sing like you say, like a third of the song. Well, that's cool, but it's also kind of like, it's it's hard to sort of like project yourself into the consciousness of listeners if you've got three separate personalities. That just makes it more complex. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Identity.
yeah, there's not a clear identity. You know, you're like a three-headed band instead of a one-headed band. I mean, how many times have you? I'm sure all the time people see Bono's face and they go, "Oh, that's you too." You know. Well, I mean, in a way that seems kind of unfair to the other guys in the band, but that's just the reality of it. Or like, I remember when Dan had his baby and his wife was out pushing the baby, and someone said, "Ooh, that's Semisonics' baby," which was kind of funny. So there's something about like having just one voice for a band that's, I think, is kind of important, and I think we all sort of realized that when we started Semisonic.
Did John never felt elbowed then in some way?
Well, I think John, I mean, it was always hard, you know, John is a super talented vocalist, so it's kind of like a hard thing to sort of like adjust to that new situation. But I think also in Semisonic, I mean, there was plenty of room for John to apply. I mean, he's like, John is the best musician of the band. He's the best on his instruments. In fact, John's bass playing is probably better than any other one aspect of the band. He's also a great sort of studio. He knows how to turn knobs in the studio. He's got this weird sort of sixth sense that he doesn't even have to look at the knobs. He just does this, and suddenly everything sounds better. So we were really good about exploiting that in the studio. But I mean, it is hard. It was, you know, Semisonic for John was kind of probably a step back from the spotlight, whereas me, I went from the copy machine to the stage. So it was like a big step up for me. So it was, you know, different for everybody.
I think we're pushing time.
We are, but I can give you more time later on today too. But for right now, we can bring the session to a close. If you guys would thank Jake for coming in and Dan for showing you interview technique.
Thank you, guys.
Also, I'd like to introduce Johnny from the Lincoln Journal-Star.
Okay.